Races are simple. Get to the line first. This basic objective leads to the number one mistake of distance running: going out too fast. The opening half feels pretty good, but then the bell rings for the final lap and the lactate starts to build in your legs. You aren't slowing down, at least not much, but every step brings with it just a bit more pain than before. Then you commit the number 2 mistake. You turn your head back for just a moment to check on your competition. And there she is, Sifan Hassan. She's right behind you. It's her moment. She is going to win this race. Long before Sifan Hassan became an Olympic medalist, a world champion, or even a runner at all, she wasn't afraid of moving apart from the pack. Growing up in Ethiopia, a young Sifan preferred to do things her own way. This often got her into trouble. In Ethiopian culture, according to Sifan, children are not encouraged to ask why. It is just expected that when asked, they will do something. I repeatedly asked why, she said, because that is who I am. It is my personality. In art class, which she hated, she would always ask the teacher, "Why am I doing this? I don't like this." Sifan's stubbornness translated to math class too, which she also hated. So much so that she once ditched it to go hiking instead. Sifan lost track of time, walking over 20 kilometers before realizing not only had she missed math class, she had missed the entire school day. Not to mention the sun was setting. She would have to walk back home in the dark. Most children would have been frightened by this, but not Sifan. She knew something about this darkness at an early age. The darkness is always there, whether you fear it or not. Most people fear it so much they do everything they can to avoid it. But Sifan was never so afraid of the dark. The thing about the dark place, she realized, the more and more times you go there, the less scary it is. Sifan would go through more darkness in her young life than most. In 2008, she left her mom and her home in Ethiopia, boarding an airplane alone with plans to seek asylum in Europe. Arriving in the Netherlands as a teenager, Sifan stayed at a children's refugee center. Unfamiliar with the language and missing the life she had left behind, it was like a prison to her. Eventually, the foundation supporting Sifan relocated her to a girls' home in the city of Leeuwarden, where she mentioned to the staff how she had always loved running. A staff member brought her to the local Leonidas Athletics Club, where she would meet her first coach. The teenager couldn't afford spikes, but her coach lent her some, and before long, Sifan was training relentlessly. Running to her was a type of darkness. Specifically, it was the feeling of pushing yourself so close to the edge of your abilities that you think you might go over. When you go a bit farther, a bit faster than you have before. You never know if you'll be able to get there. By going to this place often, Sifan became not just faster but stronger, better able to deal with the other difficult areas of her life. Eventually, Sifan moved again, this time to Eindhoven, where she became part of a small Ethiopian community and began taking running more seriously. Her life in those days was simple. She rented out a small room, just a mattress and some clothes. On the wall, she had a small image of the Kaaba, a reminder of her faith. She would pray and she would train. Not much else. Sifan had her eyes set on a bigger goal, one for which she knew this level of dedication was required. She wanted to make the Olympics. As a first step, she decided to enter the Eindhoven Half Marathon in 2011, her first major competitive race. Her coaches, however, urged her not to. She hadn't trained specifically for the distance, and they were worried she might get hurt. Sifan ran anyway, and she won. Lofty goals were nothing new for Sifan. She had always been the type to make them. But the same stubbornness which brought her to the start line of her first half marathon as an amateur runner with minimal racing experience would also get her into trouble. After becoming a Dutch citizen in 2013, Sifan took the European middle distance circuit by storm, winning the U23 gold medal in the European cross-country championships and breaking the Dutch indoor record in the 1500 meters. Needless to say, Sifan was by this point used to blazing past the competition. But this would not be the case at the 2015 World Championships in Beijing. Her rivals in the 1500 meter final included world record holder Genzebe Dibaba, as well as young Kenyan phenom Faith Kipyegon. Sifan, though, was confident. She went out slow. Too slow. By the time the runners turned for the final stretch, she was too far back to make it up.
I don't have much experience, and that's why I was behind. I should have gone forward, and I was come later. That cost a lot of energy. I did what I can.
In 2016, Sifan contested the 1500 meters again at the Rio Olympics against a familiar field. She ran from the back once more, but the other contenders went out fast. They separated from the pack and left Sifan in the dust. Despite an impressive kick on the final lap, she finished 5th, off of the podium. After her disappointing loss, she needed to reevaluate everything. Behind the scenes, Sifan had struggled with injuries in the build-up to the Olympics, and knew as a result she had left a good bit of performance on the table. Moreover, her narrow focus on the 1500, which she wanted to win more than anything, prevented her from considering that her racing style might be better suited to another event. While she sure had the toughness to pace herself and go for it at the very end, the 1500 was just too short a distance to make up against the world-class frontrunners. So Sifan left her coach and decided to focus on the 5000 meter. It turned out to be a brilliant choice.
This is my first championship of 5,000 meters, and I get medal. I was ranked 9. I'm so happy.
A bronze in the 2017 World Championships cemented her potential in the event, and a gold medal and championship record at the next year's European Championships put the world on watch. She even started running the 10,000 meters. By extending her range across events, Sifan built up the versatility to handle any style of race. Fast or slow, pacing was no longer the problem. And you bet she hadn't given up on the 1500. After setting the women's mile world record in the summer of 2019, Sifan came up with another laughably ambitious goal. She put her sights on a historic triple at the 2019 World Championships in Doha, hoping to contest the 1500, the 5000, and the 10,000. Unfortunately, the schedule made this impossible, since the 1500 and the 5000 were too close together to realistically run both. To make matters worse, Sifan's new coach, American Alberto Salazar, was hit with a 4-year ban from the United States Anti-Doping Agency for violations amid rumors that he had coordinated a doping program for some athletes in his Organ Project training group, which Sifan was a part of. While Sifan was never implicated directly in the scandal, media and competitors began to question whether or not she was clean, something which outraged her.
I am clean. I do my best. I get always tested. I believe in clean. I will stay clean. I was clean. I will stay clean. I will stay forever also clean. If they want to do it, they can test me every single day.
She had been putting up world-class performances for years, long before linking up with Salazar, and felt the allegations were entirely unfair. Amid the swirling accusations, Sifan went scorched earth on the track world, dominating the 10,000 meter in her second ever race at the distance, before getting the best of her rival Kipyegon in the 1500, setting a championship record and running the 6th fastest ever time in the process. At this point, Sifan was simply the best, and she wanted to rub it in. Although she had nothing left to prove in the eyes of many, Sifan had unfinished business: the triple. To be the best, she realized, you had to do something that no one had ever done before. Her career best form and the more spread out schedule lined up perfectly for her to contest the feat at the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. Unfortunately, there would not be a 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. The coronavirus pandemic put the athletics world on standstill, and Sifan, along with her fellow athletes, was forced to prolong her training cycle an additional year, as the event was postponed until 2021. This grueling hiatus put Sifan in that familiar dark place yet again. The body and mind are only meant to push so hard for so long. She was breaking down both physically and mentally. The pursuit of history and an otherworldly level of grit, the only things keeping her moving forward. The same psychological urge that tricks runners into going out fast is the one you have to resist in order to go out slow and race from the back. When you front run, the mind convinces you can get the suffering out of the way early, and then simply hold on as you fatigue towards the end. But all the great runners know that you can't. Human physiology prefers the reverse. Anyone can run hard at the start when the legs are fresh and the adrenaline is pumping. It takes a special type of toughness to know that suffering is coming and to wait for it. To bide your time until you are the most tired, and only then to make your move. What sets the champions apart is how long you wait. The later you leave it, the faster you have to go. It's almost sick. How deep into the darkness are you willing to go? 6 races in 8 days. Sifan started her campaign in Tokyo with a familiar foe, the 1500 meters. In the heats, things were going smoothly until the unthinkable happened. She got tangled up with another runner and fell on the final lap. In what is still arguably the single greatest racing performance of all time, Sifan roared back, sprinting the final 300-odd meters and somehow winning the heat in order to qualify for the final. Still probably riding the adrenaline from such a moment, she cruised to victory in the 5,000-meter final later that day. However, in the next day's 1,500-meter final, the cumulative fatigue of so many hard efforts in quick succession seemed to catch up to her, as she settled for a disappointing bronze. To many athletes, it would have been the peak of a career. Not to Sifan. She struggled through the medal ceremony with a disingenuous smile and went back to her hotel room angry. At that moment, Sifan knew there was something inside of her. That was when I decided, she said. I will die tomorrow. I will go to the end. As Sifan towed the start line for the 10,000-meter final the next day, the world seemed to disappear around her. Her eyes focused not on the woman to her left and right, her ears not on the quiet eeriness of the empty stands. All her senses went dormant, as if to conserve energy for the task ahead. Not only was it the last race on her schedule for the Olympics, it was the longest. And she went to the end all right. Despite needing medical assistance after crossing the finish line to win gold, Sifan did make it out of Tokyo alive. Not only that, she made it out as the greatest female distance runner of all time. After the slog of the Olympics, and with nothing left seemingly to accomplish, Sifan faced an unfamiliar feeling. For the first time in her life, she couldn't bring herself to run. Her heart just wasn't in it.
I would like to really get motivation. It doesn't come. I train it. I don't want to push myself. I don't care about running anymore.
And for several months, she didn't run, taking an extended break from the sport which meant so much to her. Some wondered if her career was over. Others wondered what was next.
To get motivation, you have to set another goal. To set another goal, you need time.
When you accomplish everything there is to accomplish on the track, there's only one thing really left to do. Get off of it. Not all running takes place on that familiar, flat, well-marked artificial surface. Road running trades this manicured environment for the uneven, hilly, pounding asphalt of city streets. The marathon is the greatest challenge in all of athletics. Some of the most accomplished track athletes ever have fallen apart when attempting to face it. The very best somehow make it work. Sifan wanted to become one of them. She chose London for her debut marathon, a fast course with a fast field, preferring as always to take challenges in tandem, or maybe simply as an homage to her idol Mo Farah. Something deep inside Sifan requires that she sets goals that are not just challenging, but borderline impossible. It's as if the distinct possibility she might not achieve them makes her work even harder. In this case, Sifan would have to prepare by running 120 miles a week while fasting during Ramadan. For the first time in her professional career, or at least the first time she would admit it publicly, she was scared. Something about the marathon was different. It set fear in her.
Like sometimes I wake up, I was like, what the hell I decide to run this stupid thing? Why I decided running this marathon, Why I decided. And
Sifan made all the mistakes runners tend to make in their first marathon. She missed a water stop, having not practiced them much. Around the midway point, she fell decisively behind the lead pack. She even stopped, not once but twice, to stretch out her hip, which had been bothering her. Lots of more seasoned marathoners might have DNF'd at this point, recognizing victory was impossible and choosing to minimize the damage and live to fight another day. Call it inexperience or call it an inextinguishable will, Sifan went on. And as the race neared its end, her legs somehow knew what time it was. Her competitors out front in a world of their own, extracting every last ounce of energy they could just to keep going, jockeyed for position as they passed in front of Buckingham Palace and turned onto the final straightaway. As they neared the finish line, if not for the roar of the crowd, they might have heard to the rear the light but distinct cadence of footsteps in rapid succession. Something you don't hear all that often in a marathon. An all-out sprint. But by the time they realized, it was too late. Because she was there. Sifan Hassan. Right behind them.
What an incredible performance from the Dutch athlete. In her debut marathon, she had the temerity to come to London, to take on the world's best, to take on the toughest race, to take on the longest race she's ever done. And she's been brilliant.